Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Vintage Books Live. Tonight we have Amanda DeWitt with us. We're very excited. I'm very excited. Amanda's books was my airplane read on the way to Children's Institute last summer. Children's Institute is a big uh, sort of industry, all kids book publishers and writers and booksellers and whatnot, all getting together to share and talk and share ideas and all that kind of stuff. So I've been kind of scheming to have Amanda on ever since then, and we finally made it happen. So I'm very
Yeah,
excited about that.
yeah, me too.
Amanda's most recent book is called Wren Martin Ruins It All. And do you happen to have that with you? I forgot to ask you.
I always have my prop copy, so
Yay, good. I know since I do these at home, it's like I always have to I try to remember to remind people have the book because I won't have it because I'm at home.
yeah, I never pass up an opportunity to.
Yay. And so I think I'll just start with my usual beginning question of what was the story of this book coming to be? How did it get started as an idea and what was its journey to publication?
So, so what's kind of funny about Red Martin is that it kind of starts with my debut novel, Aces Wild. I have that one with me too. Um,
Yay.
and that when we were submitting this book to editors, so it takes place in Las Vegas. There's like there's gambling, obviously. We kept getting rejections like, oh no, we can't do gambling, we can't sell gambling. And
Yeah.
so I was like, you know what? My next book is just going to be in high school, and it's going to be there's not going to be anything controversial about it. It's just going to be a high school rom-com. So I started working on this, and then we ended up selling this, so
That's
it worked
awesome.
out. But that was my motivation behind this one. I was like, high school
That's-
rom-com. There's
Yeah,
no
okay. It'll be completely fine.
completely innocent, but it was really fun to write too. So
That's very cool. So why don't you start out by giving us like I guess kind of the flat copy for those who haven't had a chance to see the book, a little bit about the book without giving anything away.
yeah, so Ren Martin Ruins It All is about the titular Ren Martin. That's him, my little boy. He has become the student council president on a technicality, but he's achieved his dreams because he wants to abolish the school's Valentine's Day dance that the whole school is obsessed with. It's kind of like they do that instead of prom, and they go all out and like spend all this money on it. And he doesn't like that because it's like, hey, our school's falling apart. Like we should be spending the money on something that helps everyone, not a dance that like, excludes like queer people, excludes like people who don't want to date, like all these different, subcategories that might not be that interested in it, including him because he's asexual. So it's like kind of awkward for him.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he wants to do that, which the school would riot if he did. So his self-appointed rival, or who he appointed as his rival, Leo, suggests, hey, let's get a sponsorship from Buddy, which is an anonymous friendship app. So that way they'll sponsor the dance, you can have your budget. It's kind of a win-win, which he's like, well, I don't want the dance to exist at all, so not really, but he doesn't get what he wants. So they have to work together in student council to make this dance happen with the sponsorship. And along the way, he does start using the app, allegedly for research. And as you might imagine, he starts talking to someone and gets in a little over his head.
Yay.
Well, this is
You
some,
should
some
read it.
miscommunication at the
That's
right
all I'm gonna
times.
say. Y'all need to go read it. It's good. I think what I loved about it, I mean many things, but um it sometimes I love YA and I read a lot of YA. And sometimes I read YA and I'll be like, I love this book and I'm enjoying this book, but I can't, I mean, if I really had to sit and think about it, can I really believe that this would happen? Um, this one was not that. I was just like, oh yeah, I can totally see this. Which it doesn't really matter because you can suspend your disbelief and
Yeah, it
enjoy.
depends on what you're looking for,
Yeah,
which
you
is
know,
funny because Aces
but
Wild is the suspension of disbelief book.
uh, but it's also kind of, I don't know, fun and comforting to find a book where the people are just like real believable like, oh, I could see myself in high school doing that or feeling that way, or I could see myself having been very self-righteous and not wanting there to be an expensive dance. I was like, oh, I could totally
I think that's the kind of the most
yeah.
fun part about writing the characters in this book, especially Ren, is that it's like, yeah, he's over the top, but also like he's 16. Of course
Yeah.
he's over the top.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. What um I was trying to think how to phrase this, but like when you are writing a book that's YA, what do you tap into? Like, I mean, I think there's kind of an obvious answer, but maybe beyond a little bit beyond the obvious answer. Like, once most of us get past those teenage years and we're just like, okay, I'm done with that. Like, what do you tap into to kind of bring, get yourself back into a space that you can write, honestly, such really relatable, believable characters at that level?
I guess because I don't know, I think about this a lot in different age groups, are focused on kind of different themes as to where you are like at that
Yeah,
age.
yeah,
And part of what I like so much about YA is that like a big theme, and like I think Ren has this a lot where it's like finding yourself and like what you want and like where you fit in, and like that's such a huge thing as a teenager, but I do think that it's like something that you kind of do multiple times throughout your
yeah,
life.
yeah,
And I think that's why
yeah,
it's so like fun and so like easy to tap into is because it's like, yeah, like I'm doing that right now, Like I just moved states recently. So like I am like reinventing myself in
yeah,
that way.
yeah.
It's just when you're a teenager, it's the first time. So everything's at like a 20 instead of at like a
Yes,
7.
yeah. And I totally agree because I think that is one reason why we all can read YA at different ages and still appreciate it and find meaning in it. Because
Hmm.
yeah, beyond the story, like there's a lot of real like issues that these characters are dealing with too. And it's wrapped in this really fun and a little bit snarky and, great story, but they're dealing with life stuff too, and friendship and relationships and all the everything can be fraught in that,
Yeah.
especially if you're ace and you're like, how do I navigate this space when I maybe will want something different than
Yeah,
somebody else?
especially when like in this case of the Valentine's Day dance, it's like what I want isn't what's being pushed on
Yeah.
me or like what
Yeah.
everybody else seems to want. Though it's funny. I talk about this a lot with this book too, and that like that's what I like comedic stuff for is that like yeah, you can have fun and like be silly, but then kind of sneak in the serious stuff where it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I think I said something where it's like, grief can be funny. Like it's not just I mean, like it is sad all the time, but like sometimes it's absurd.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's
Yeah.
funny. It's the
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. No, yeah. And I think that that is what I would love to see more people come into. I did actually, the thing I had to do before we started talking tonight was a weekly like book sharing books, and we're doing a reading challenge this year. And the category we were talking about tonight is middle grade books. And I was saying a similar thing for middle grade books is that they're fun, and yes, the characters are whatever age that's appropriate for that book. But just like YA, like there's a lot of really difficult things that middle grade and YA books tackle. In some ways, they can be kind of cathartic to read them as you're older because you can't always process stuff when you're
Mhm.
in the middle of it. You're a middle grade reader or you're a high school reader. And
And the fact
sometimes
that you can, yeah, kind of
yeah,
tap into
you
the
can come back to it
childhood
and go, oh,
perspective
yeah, yeah,
instead of like, yeah, I'm sad, but I also have to go to work.
exactly, exactly. Or you maybe deal with some stuff that you couldn't deal with then because you didn't really realize what was going on. Or
Yeah.
so I'm always like, yay, read YA in middle grade because
Yeah,
you'll
I
get
definitely, yeah, I love like kid lit for that.
yeah, yeah. So what has your experience been? It's kind of funny when you said Ace is Wild and the gambling and stuff, and you were trying to write something uncontroversial because, you know, there's a lot of stuff going around in certain parts of the country with book banning for various topics. Have you run into that with Wren or Aces Wild?
No, I mean, not that I know of.
Yeah, yeah,
Fortunately, which like, so not currently since I moved, but I was a librarian in Florida.
yeah,
So, um, I have encountered some messiness there
yeah,
professionally.
yeah,
But luckily, yeah, I haven't heard anything about my books. I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, is that like people kind of take asexual stuff less seriously in like the queer sphere, which means it can kind of
yeah,
like
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if the people doing the book bans necessarily are super familiar with
I'm
asexuality.
I'm guessing that potentially not.
Yeah, or they find it
Um,
inoffensive or less
yeah,
offensive, or
yeah,
who
yeah,
knows what's going on there.
yeah.
But so
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that, at least that I'm not having to deal
Yeah, I
with
mean,
that crap.
I wish we weren't even having to like have these kinds of questions,
Yeah.
but it is an interesting thing, I think, as booksellers and authors of having to kind of grapple with what's going to happen with this book and
Yeah, well, you never know. Like you never know what one person is going to decide to have a
yeah,
crusade
yeah,
about.
yeah,
I feel like a lot of these like controversial books, I'm like, I don't
yeah,
see it.
yeah. And I honestly don't think it's really about the book a lot of the time
It's
because I think
yeah.
a lot of times
The
most people haven't actually read the books.
like, oh,
But
I heard
well,
about
I'm
it. Like,
glad you're
okay.
not getting caught up in that space,
Yeah, I'm grateful for
but
that.
I but also, you just wish that that wasn't even a conversation. But
Yeah.
what talk to me a little bit about I want to come back to Ace as well because I want you to share a little bit about that story as well. But before we do that, talk to me a little bit about like what's your process as a writer when you're sitting down to write a story. It's one of the themes that I talk about a lot with people on this show is like plotter or pantser and like how do you construct a story and what feels right to you. It's always interesting to see like everybody's individual approach to that.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I love how everybody has a widely different approach. That's why when
Yeah,
people are starting
yeah.
out, I'm like, you're just gonna have to figure it out, like what works for
Mm-hmm.
you. Because I am a full 100% unrepentant pantser. I've never met an outline that I liked. So it's it's got a little more constructed like as I started publishing because I don't know, so you get like a better feel for like what's marketable, like
Yeah,
and after you've edited a couple times with like an editor, you kind of get the feel for like, okay, like how can we make this book shaped from the beginning. But yeah, I'll have a concept and I just sit down and it's like, okay,
yeah,
let's just see what
yeah.
happens.
I love that. I love how it's just so vastly different for
Yeah, I know
everybody.
some people who cannot move
I,
without a font
yeah.
liner.
Or I know some people who like are kind of half and half, or they like free write for some of it, but then, it's interesting to me, and I totally agree with what you commented on about telling people that are starting out, read, learn, listen to people, but ultimately you've got to figure it out your own
Yeah,
way because whatever everybody else tells you you have to do isn't necessarily going to
necessarily.
work for you. And then if you decide that is the way to do it, then you're just going to make yourself feel guilty because you don't do it that way.
Yeah. Well, it's like with my method, I'm like, yeah, like my MO is kind of chaotic. So I don't want to say like you have to do this because it might not be that. But what I try and tell my precious friends who don't listen to me is that if like you're so married to an outline that you're not writing anything because you don't have an outline and you're not writing the outline,
Yeah.
you're not writing. So like maybe
Yeah.
time to
Yeah.
try something else.
Yeah. No,
Like
I think I probably anybody who's listened to this, more than one week in a row has probably heard this, but something that I saw recently from Lanny Taylor, who was the Gods and Monsters, wrote God Strange the Dreamer and Gods and
mhm.
Monsters and stuff. And she was looking at some advice where it was somebody was basically saying, well, you have to do this and you have to do that. And she was kind of like, if I would have followed that advice, I would have never written a book. Like, or oh, I know, it's writing the bad first drafts. You
Mhm.
have to write a bad first draft. You have to just do that. That's everybody needs to do that was kind of the advice. And she's like, if I wrote like that, if I didn't self-edit as I went along, I would have
And
never written anything because for her, it was stressful to not have it the way she
mhm.
wanted it before she went forward. And then she'd write a chunk and then she'd get it the way she wanted it. And then that's just how she does it. And, just talking about how you really have to find your own way because
Yeah. Yeah,
if,
I definitely get that because I write entirely chronologically because I'm figuring it out. And so yeah,
yeah,
you'll see people like, oh, if you're stuck, just skip it. And it's like, well, I can't. Because
yeah,
yeah, if you get
yeah.
in your head,
Because
then
it's
you're just not gonna
not,
do it.
yeah, yeah. And some people can do that. Some people can like go right to end and then come back and figure out how you're gonna
Yeah,
put
piece it
it together
together.
or whatever. But yeah,
I'm
yeah,
kind of jealous of those people, but I think we're always
yeah,
jealous of like we always
yeah,
think that the other way is easier. And it's like, no, it's
yes,
just harder in a
no.
different way.
Well, it might be for somebody else, but not for you.
Yeah. We're all
So
looking for the magic, like,
exactly. Well, we're all looking for a way to make it a little bit less work and a little bit
yeah.
more fun.
Every single time I'm like, oh, it is just hard work.
Yes. Dang, what the heck? So tell me about Aces Wild. I actually haven't had a chance to read this one yet, but it's on my list.
Yeah, so it's my debut, my first child, my first published child. But so Aces Wild is about five asexual teenagers who so Jack is the main character. His mom is a casino mogul. So he's from Las Vegas Strip, but his mom gets sent to jail, and he is convinced that her rival basically like he's like, yeah, she does bad things. Like everybody there, like all rich people do bad things, but the only reason she got caught is because her rival like turned her in or blackmailed her or whatever. And so he gets his online friend group together to all come in Las Vegas and basically infiltrate the rivals casino like high roller club and get evidence against him to prove that his mom is innocent or like to get her out of jail. So there's lots of hijinks.
That sounds very fun.
This
I'll,
especially this early book you see.
the Ace version of Ocean's 11.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So this was a
So
fun one.
what made you decide that, or maybe this wasn't a conscious decision, because you made a comment that it was your first published novel, which I think is very common for people
Mhm.
to have written more than one before you finally get one that you feel like is either you feel like is commercially viable or your agent or whatever feels like it's commercially viable. What what do you think pushed it over the edge for this one to go where maybe one's hadn't gone before?
So what's interesting is that this is also my first contemporary novel. Before that, I thought I mean, I guess, you can be multiple things, but I was always planning to be a fantasy writer. I'd written like a contemporary fantasy, but like mostly it was like, yeah, different shades of fantasy. And then I had this idea and I was like, oh, I can't do that because I don't write contemporary. I don't know how. Like, I don't know how to write just like kids in high school, which is funny because then like I did. But but so finally I got over that obstacle and I was like, oh yeah, no, it's like an action comedy. Like
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
frame of mind. I can write contemporary. It's okay. And yeah, so I think it was just like, and I think with that, I was able to have fun with it and just kind of like I've always liked like comedic stuff, but my books weren't really comedic. They like some were like, just fantasy, some were kind of like serious and dark.
yeah,
But this one I got to like, yeah, I just kind of have that very like comedic voice and like kind of like
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like Wren is very like dry and like tongue in cheek and
yeah.
dramatic. And yeah, I guess it just worked and now I'm a contemporary writer.
Yes, that's awesome. Because I think that's the other thing that I think people don't. I mean, I don't think I've asked anybody else that. I think I might have to add that to my list of questions that I ask people. But I think that most people don't really have a concept that most writers, when their debut novel comes out, it's not the first book that, most writers have written most of the time multiple things before, like a lot of people multiple complete books before they
Mhm.
get that one book that's gonna go.
I think this
And
was five. This is number 5 or 6. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly, but
Yeah.
yeah, that was a few.
And the fact that we can end up writing in genres that we never expected to. Like I was going to write fantasy too. Now I write kids nonfiction,
You never
which
know.
is a real leap,
That's what
but
I
it
like. I
works
like to
for me. Like
tell.
I don't think I could actually, I mean, in retrospect, I don't think I could write, I don't even know if I could write fiction. I certainly couldn't write. I still love to read it, and it's
Mhm.
honestly what I like to read, but I think we kind of find our voice, and sometimes it's not where we
Not what you were
expected it to
expecting.
be.
That's
So,
what like I like
yeah,
to tell like my unpublished friends too, is that it's like you don't know. Like
yeah, yeah,
I never would have expected to be a contemporary writer, but
yeah.
here
There
we
you
are.
go. And it doesn't mean that you can't go do something else later, but if you find something that works for you, it's like, hey,
Yeah,
well,
it's like
good.
okay,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
never know.
And there's always market factors, I think, at play too. Because I think sometimes when you have a certain kind of voice in a certain kind of voice in fantasy that maybe doesn't fit what the market feels like
Hmm.
that's the voice for fantasy, then sometimes you won't sell in that genre, even though the
Hmm.
books are perfectly lovely.
It's
I
just
mean,
not
I
people
think that's,
expect or
yeah, I
what was
think
the
that's
thing
another thing
too?
that people don't always realize is that, publishing, while varied, does have its, well, this is how fantasy works, and this is how horror works, and this is how this works. And if you're kind of writing in between, a lot of
Sometimes
times
they're like, oh, we
maybe
don't
you
understand
don't
that.
sell. I see a lot of very good self-published authors kind of playing in those in-between spaces that publishing is maybe just not.
Not ready for,
They're not ready for, or
or they don't
maybe
want, or
the profit margins just aren't there
hmm.
until something takes off, and then they're like, oh, wait a
I don't want a
minute.
ton of it.
But sometimes they just aren't, and it's a business, so I get it. But
Yeah. Well, that was the thing too when I wrote this one. It's my first contemporary because I didn't have an agent at the time, and YA fantasy is just so competitive, like so oversaturated that it was
yeah.
like, okay, well, let's try something else.
Yeah, no, I totally, and like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that any of the others were bad. It's just like there you found your
Yeah,
little
it just wasn't the right time, wasn't the
it
right
worked.
combination.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have more in the pipeline that you can
Yes.
talk about? Because sometimes you can't yet. So
Yes, so I can't show a cover yet, though I have seen it, and it's beautiful. But
Yay.
so I have a third book from Peachtree Teen coming out in spring next year. I don't know when exactly
Yeah.
yet. But sometime early 2025. It's called The Underwood Tapes, and it is a departure from these ones. It's not funny. It's it's a lot more like mystery. It's like a generational mystery. There's like a little bit of a tragedy element to it. It's set in Florida, so I get my Florida vibe still.
Yeah.
But
Yay.
so I'm excited for that one because
That's very cool.
it's very different. So I hope people still like it. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they will. Because I think the thing is that once you have what's the word for it? I mean, voice is kind of the word for it, but there's a difference between like a voice between like say a snarky contemporary and something that's darker. Yeah, the voice is going to be different, but there are elements of how the author does things that don't change, if that
that's
makes sense.
true. Yeah, that people still
Um,
like.
that if you like that, like I was thinking of somebody that I just read that have like high school mystery and also middle grade fantasy,
Hmm.
and they're very different, but
You can still kind of
there are
recognize.
still like DNA from that author that are still there either way. And so yeah, I'm
Hmm.
sure that it will be good. I'm excited for you. That's very
I
exciting.
definitely feel grateful when people are like, "Oh, yeah, no, I'll read anything you write." I'm like, "Oh, are you sure?
Uh
Are you sure?" Don't
what
speak
is
too soon.
what's the best um like feedback that you've gotten that has just like sort of made your day, that's not so personal that you can actually share it?
I mean, I guess just like in general, it's been really cool and really like No, honestly, I should have expected it, but I didn't. But it's been really cool how much the like asexual community like showed up for these books and like the sweet messages I've gotten for people from people about like what it means to them. Because I don't know, when I'm writing these, I'm just like, oh, it's just like a silly like heist or a silly rom-com. Like I'm just having
Yeah,
fun. But like people will message me and tell me how much like it legitimately
yeah,
like means something to them to
yeah.
be able to like see themselves and like relate to different lines. And just the people I've been able to talk to and to meet at like conferences and stuff. It's like, oh wow, I wasn't
That's
expecting to
good.
be able to
I'm
like
glad.
touch
Because I
people's
think
lives in
that's
any
the
way.
thing that when you don't see yourself in anything, then to have such great representation is like super huge. And yeah, it's a fun story, but that's kind of the point is seeing yourself in a heist novel and seeing yourself in a rom-com and seeing, like not being delegated to
Certain
one
goals.
place where, oh, here's your token book. It's more now we're seeing characters that appear in all different kinds of books, whether they're fantasy or romance or whatever. And I just think that I hope we get to a place where that isn't notable, but I think it still is, and it's very special that people
Yeah, we definitely are getting a
can
lot
see.
more like
Yeah,
awesome ace books and like yeah,
yeah,
range.
yes,
But
yeah,
yeah, we're definitely still working on it. But
yeah,
it's a lot
yeah,
better than when I
no.
was in high school. When I was in high
Oh
school, I was
yeah,
like,
for
oh God.
sure, for sure. No, and I'm super glad to see um I mean, when I was long ago, far, far away, like there was really nothing
Hmm.
when us Xers were in high school. And so honestly, to see the range coming out now is just, I just get super excited about it
Yeah,
because it's
it's
like I'm
cool.
so glad to see this here
And it's
for
cool to like be
my
a part of
kids
it.
and yeah, yeah, good. Yay. So you
Yeah.
have a book coming out next spring. I promised that I would ask about chickens, but since you moved, do you still have them with you?
No, not
Oh,
anymore. I had to get rid of the
that's good.
chickens.
Yeah,
It wasn't quite worth moving them across the country.
yes. Yes. No.
Which we rent right now, but at some point when we have a house, I do want to get chickens again because
Yay. Yay.
once you have the backyard eggs, it's kind of hard to go back.
I know, I know. My chicken stopped laying in the winter.
Oh,
And
so hard.
I finally had to break down and buy store eggs. And I was like, girls, you're letting me down, man.
Ah. But then once it hits spring, you're like, I
Oh
have
yeah,
so
now
many
they're going
eggs, I
again.
can't eat them all.
Yeah. No, that's fun. No, yeah, no. Moving chickens across the country is a bit more complicated than dogs and cats and other
Yeah, I feel like the hotels
creatures.
would have been
So,
like, what?
yeah. What? No, I don't think so. You want to do what?
Yeah, I was like, well, I paid $40 for these chickens from Tractor Supply, so it's
Yeah.
okay. They'll go to good homes.
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
I'm super excited that you have another book. We will definitely be looking for it.
Yeah,
And
in
yeah.
like, I don't know, 8 months.
Yeah.
It feels
Yeah,
like forever,
oh
but
yeah, if it's spring next year, we'll see it in catalogs probably in the fall.
okay. Yeah,
We start looking at it's always very unnerving because it's like we'll be looking at Christmas books and in like probably May, June-ish, it'll
you're like,
start
I can't
being
be
like,
thinking about
I'm like,
this.
no, 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 you can't make me.
I
But
just finished my edits. We have to do copy edits still, but we just finished my edits, so I'm like, oh, thank God, my part's almost over.
yay. That's that. Yeah, I was gonna say you're pretty close to done then because usually
Yeah, and then I
copy
can
edits is
coast the
not
rest of the
super big
way.
thing. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, you got to do it now. I don't have to do anything
Not
anymore.
my problem. I'll
Yeah.
write whatever I write next.
Yay. Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It
Um,
was fun.
just to let everybody know who is watching, then my brain goes shark, shut down. No, we've got Emmeline Duncan next week on Vintage Books Live. She has the latest installment in her Ground Rules mystery book is coming out next week. And then on the 30th at 1 p.m. we have And I think I still have the book out. I'm grabbing it behind me. We have John and Annie Furnace. They're going to be in the store with us. We tip that just right. There we go. The book is out today, and we have signed copies in the store. So if you're not going to be able to attend the event, please stop by and grab a copy, order online if you're not in the area. But we also save books that aren't signed so that if you want to come to the event and get the book signed at the event, you can do that. So join us for that. Thank you